The first time Alexander Cole met Danielle Brooks, he wasn't looking for wisdom. He was looking for entertainment. And yet, in a matter of seconds, a waitress with calloused hands and tired eyes said something that would haunt him far longer than any business deal ever could. That night, the rain came down like it was trying to wash the city clean. Thunder rolled in the distance as luxury cars lined up in front of Ember and Oak, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, a place where dinner cost more than most people's weekly paychecks. Inside, chandeliers glowed golden, laughter echoed across the marble floor, and money spoke in every polished reflection. At a corner table, surrounded by expensive wine and men who thought they ruled the world, sat Alexander Cole, tech billionaire, Forbes cover regular, and self-proclaimed genius. He had the sharp suit, the sharper mind, and the kind of smile that made people forget how dangerous power could be. To his friends, he was untouchable, a man who had turned code into an empire. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about innovation or mergers. He was thinking about how bored he'd become. Trent, his oldest friend and the loudest in the group, poured himself another glass of wine. "Alex," he said, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin that money often buys, "you're stressing too much about the market. Ask her for some financial advice." He nodded toward the waitress setting down their plates. "She probably knows more about saving than your whole accounting team." The table erupted in laughter. Rich men loved to laugh when they were the punchline's safest distance away. Alexander smirked. "You might be right," he said lightly. "Hey, what's your name?" The waitress glanced up, calm, steady, unimpressed. "Danielle," she said. Her voice carried no fear, no hesitation. Just quiet professionalism. "Well, Danielle," Alexander continued, his tone teasing, "you look like someone who's good with money. If you had a few billion lying around, what would you invest in?" The men burst out laughing again. But Danielle didn't join in. She didn't even smile. She simply looked at him, really looked, and said, in a low, measured voice, "Maybe I'd start by investing in something that doesn't lose value the moment people stop watching, like integrity." The laughter died instantly. Alexander's smile froze. The air thickened around the table. Danielle didn't blink. She didn't seem angry, just tired of men who thought their wealth made them wise. "Excuse me," he said, half amused, half defensive. "You asked for advice," she said simply. "That's mine." Trent chuckled awkwardly, trying to break the tension, but no one followed. The silence between Danielle and Alexander was heavier than the rain outside. After a second, she placed the last plate on the table, nodded politely, and walked away as if she hadn't just humbled one of the most powerful men in the city. Alexander didn't say another word for the rest of dinner. His friends talked, laughed, made jokes about stocks, but he couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. About the way her voice had cut through the noise like a truth he'd spent his whole life avoiding. When the meal ended, he left a generous tip, not out of guilt, but because something inside him refused to leave it at that. As his friends stumbled toward the valet, he lingered. He found Danielle near the kitchen, stacking glasses, her sleeves rolled up, her hair pulled back into a simple bun. "Danielle," he said softly. She looked up, startled but not afraid. "Can I help you, sir?" "I just wanted to say." "I didn't mean to offend you earlier," he said. "You didn't," she replied, her tone even. "People joke like that all the time. I've learned not to take it personally." He frowned. "But you meant what you said, didn't you?" She paused, then gave a small nod. "Yeah. I did." He studied her, the faint exhaustion in her face, the subtle strength behind her eyes. "You talk like someone who's seen more than she should have." Danielle gave a quiet, almost bittersweet smile. "You could say that. My father ran a small business once. He believed hard work could outlast bad luck. He was wrong. When the recession hit, we lost everything. The store. Our home. Him." Her voice softened, but it didn't break. That's when I learned money doesn't care about the people holding it. Alexander leaned against the counter, his expensive watch catching the kitchen light. So now you work here. I work wherever I have to, she said. Bills don't pay themselves. My mom's health isn't great. I pick up shifts, study when I can. I'm trying to build something that can't be taken away next time life decides to collapse. There was no bitterness in her voice, only resolve. It unsettled him. People usually tried to impress him. Danielle didn't even seem to care who he was. I'm sorry about your dad, he said quietly. She shrugged. He was a good man. He taught me what mattered before the world taught me what didn't. That line stayed with him. Long after he left the restaurant, her words replayed in his mind. Invest in something that doesn't lose value when people stop watching. The next morning, while the rest of the city rushed through their routines, Alexander sat by his penthouse window, overlooking the skyline he practically owned, and felt something he hadn't in years, emptiness. His empire was thriving, his name was everywhere, and yet, last night, one waitress had made him feel like a man who'd spent his whole life investing in the wrong things. He couldn't shake it. So, by noon, he was back at the restaurant. Danielle was cleaning tables, surprised to see him in jeans and a plain shirt instead of a tailored suit. You again, she said, half smiling. Couldn't stay away, he admitted. I was thinking about what you said last night. She laughed softly. Most people forget by the time dessert's over. I'm not most people, he said. You said you were trying to build something that lasts. What did you mean? Danielle hesitated, then sighed. If I ever had the money, I'd start a community center. For kids like I was, smart, lost, angry. Somewhere they could learn how to handle life, credit, saving, starting a business, the kind of knowledge no one gives you when you're poor. Alexander's eyes lit up slightly. That's actually brilliant. It's just a dream, she said. Dreams don't pay rent. He smiled. You'd be surprised what they can pay for if someone believes in them. Before she could ask what he meant, her phone buzzed. Danielle looked down, and the color drained from her face. What's wrong? He asked. She swallowed hard. It's my mom. Her landlord's kicking her out. The power's already shut off. Without thinking, Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Tell me how much she owes. Danielle's eyes hardened. No, she said quickly. I don't take charity. This isn't charity, he said gently. It's gratitude. You reminded me that money should mean something. She hesitated, torn between pride and desperation. Finally, her voice trembled. If you really want to help, come with me. Where? To my mother's house, she said quietly. Maybe you'll see what real investment looks like. Outside, the rain had started again, a cold, steady drizzle that soaked the streets. As Danielle grabbed her coat and Alexander followed her out of the restaurant, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking away from the world he'd built, and towards something far more valuable. He didn't know it yet, but this single decision, to follow a waitress into the storm, would change everything he thought he knew about wealth, loss, and what it truly meant to be rich. The drive to the south side of Chicago was nothing like the streets Alexander was used to. Gone were the gleaming skyscrapers and spotless sidewalks that reflected his wealth. Here, the buildings were old and scarred, the air heavy with rain and resignation. It was the kind of neighborhood that existed between hope and survival, one paycheck away from collapse, one miracle away from redemption. Danielle sat silently in the passenger seat, her arms folded tightly as the city lights faded behind them. Alexander stole glances at her between wiper swipes. She looked nothing like the quiet, composed woman from the restaurant. Now, her face showed the weight of years she hadn't been allowed to rest. Are you sure about this? He asked softly. She nodded. You said you wanted to help. You'll see what that really means. A few minutes later, they pulled up to a worn-out apartment building. The paint peeled from the bricks, and the flickering hallway light buzzed like a dying heartbeat. Danielle hurried ahead, climbing the stairs two at a time, her wet shoes squeaking against the floor. When Alexander reached the second floor, he heard her voice through a cracked door. "Mama, it's me." Inside, the small apartment was dim. The furniture was old, the air chilly. An elderly woman sat on the couch wrapped in a thin blanket, her face weary but kind. "Danielle," she said, her voice frail but warm. "I didn't think you'd get off work this early." Danielle rushed to her, kneeling beside the couch. "They cut the power again," she said, glancing at the dark lamp in the corner. "I told them we just needed one more week." "I'll be fine," her mother said softly, forcing a smile. "Don't you worry yourself." Alexander stepped inside quietly. The older woman looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know you brought company." "This is Mr. Cole," Danielle said awkwardly. "He's someone who wants to help." Her mother's eyes narrowed with polite suspicion. "You one of those caseworkers?" "No, ma'am," Alexander said gently. "I'm just a friend." He looked around, at the stacks of unpaid bills, the small photo of Danielle as a child on the table, her father smiling beside her. The weight of their life, all their losses, all their endurance, hung in the air like a story written in dust and sacrifice. Without saying another word, he pulled out his phone. "Mr. Cole, what are you doing?" Danielle asked quickly. "Fixing this," he said quietly. "How much does she owe?" "I told you, I don't." Danielle, her mother interrupted softly, placing a trembling hand on her daughter's arm. "Let the man help." Tears welled in Danielle's eyes. Pride and relief clashed silently in her expression. She nodded, and within minutes, Alexander had transferred funds to settle her mother's rent for 6 months, restore power, and even cover her medical prescriptions. When he hung up the phone, the silence in the room wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. The kind of silence that comes when fear finally loosens its grip. Danielle looked at him, eyes glassy. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know us." Alexander's voice was low, steady. "Because I spent half my life building things that didn't matter. Maybe it's time I start helping people who do." Her mother smiled softly, her frail hands clasped together. "God bless you, sir. Not many men with money remember the ones who don't." Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. For years, he'd been called genius, visionary, icon, but no one had ever thanked him with tears in their eyes. No one had ever looked at him like he mattered as a person. Later that night, after getting her mother settled, Danielle walked Alexander back outside. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet pavement and change. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to." She looked at him, truly looked, not at his wealth, not at his name, but at the man beneath all that. "You're different than I thought." He smiled faintly. "That makes two of us." For a while, they just stood there, watching the city's faint glow from the distance. Then, Danielle spoke again. "You said something earlier about helping me build the center. Did you mean it?" "I did," Alexander said. "If you'll trust me, I'll make it happen." She crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "Why do I feel like you're the one who needs saving more than I do?" He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Maybe I am." Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. Alexander didn't just throw money at the idea, he showed up. He met with city officials, filed permits, and called in favors from his vast network of architects and developers. But more than that, he asked Danielle to be part of every meeting. "This is your vision," he told her. "I'm just the muscle." They worked side by side in coffee shops and late-night diners, sketching plans on napkins and talking about what hope could look like for kids who'd never seen it. Alexander started visiting her mother often, helping fix leaky pipes and bringing groceries. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing numbers. He was chasing meaning. One evening, as they stood in front of the abandoned warehouse that would soon become the community center, Danielle looked at him and said softly, "You could have picked any charity. Why this one?" He smiled. "Because you told me the truth when no one else would." She tilted her head. "And that's worth millions to you?" He looked at her, really looked, the way a man looks when he realizes the world doesn't revolve around him anymore. "It's worth everything." Danielle smiled, her eyes shining under the dim streetlight. "Then I guess we're both investing in something that doesn't lose value." Months passed. The Brooks Community Empowerment Center opened its doors with laughter, music, and tears. Kids poured in from every block, their eyes full of curiosity. There were classrooms for financial literacy, workshops on small business skills, and programs for struggling families. The media called it a revolutionary partnership between billionaire Alexander Cole and local waitress Danielle Brooks. But behind every headline was a truth no camera could capture: 2 lives forever changed because of one moment of honesty. On opening day, as they stood before a cheering crowd, Danielle looked at him and whispered, "You know what my dad used to say?" "What?" "The richest man in the world is the one who knows what he's here for." Alexander smiled quietly. "Then I guess I finally made it." She turned to him, her voice trembling with emotion. "You did." And for the first time in years, Alexander didn't feel like the billionaire in the suit or the genius in the boardroom. He just felt human. He had walked into a restaurant one rainy night looking for a laugh, and walked out with a purpose that no amount of money could ever buy. And Danielle? She had spent her life surviving other people's mistakes, but now, because one man had finally listened, she was helping an entire generation learn to build something that lasts. Sometimes the right investment isn't made in stocks or startups. It's made in people, in their hope, in their courage, in their unshakable belief that the world can still change. And as the rain began to fall again that evening, softly against the new glass windows of the center, Alexander Cole stood beside Danielle Brooks and whispered, almost to himself, "Now this is wealth."